We're live. Hey everyone. Welcome to Mornings with Mayesh. I'm Yvonne Ashton, and we're thrilled to have you join us for today's live episode. We're diving into the exciting world of floral design and brand collaborations with our special guest, Erice McNeff of Everbloom Floral Design. Arice is our current Mayesh design star and a talented floral designer who has made waves in both the wedding industry and the world of brand activations. Today, we will explore Arice's journey in the floral industry, discussing everything from building a portfolio to pricing strategies and navigating the unique challenges of working with brands versus brides. Whether you're a seasoned florist looking to expand into brand work or a newcomer trying to establish yourself in the industry, this episode is packed with valuable insights and practical advice. We'll be taking your questions throughout the show, so please feel free to drop them in the comments. And as always, I just wanted to do a brief reminder that all of this, the replay, the podcast, and our show notes will be available on our blog in a couple of days. So let's get started and welcome Arice to Mornings with Mayesh. Hey, Arice, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me this morning.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to talk about brand activations. Your videos have done amazing. People, I feel like, have gotten a lot of value out of them. So I just wanted to quickly thank you for all of that hard work because we know how much work goes into those
Yeah.
and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was fun to put them together and to kind of, it makes you think and focus on your journey so far. So it was fun to reflect on that and just kind of have a platform to kind of share some of my insights. So I appreciate it. Thank you guys. It's been so fun working with you guys.
I love it. I love it. So, just in case people aren't familiar with you, can you just tell
Sure.
us a little bit about yourself and your flower story?
Yeah, my coming to flower story. I feel like that's always my favorite question when I meet people in this industry of like, how did you come to flowers? Because I think it's always so random. But yeah, so like you said, my name is Erice McNeff. I'm the owner of Everbloom Floral Design. That is my flower name. My like handle on Instagram is underscore Everbloom. But I work in Southern California. I'm based down all the way down in South Orange County in San Juan Capistrano. But I came to flowers, gosh, probably about 8 years ago. I graduated from school with a degree actually in broadcast journalism and media production. So completely random, and thought that I wanted to go into the world of LA and Hollywood and pursue something completely different, and then did that for a bit and realized like I absolutely hated it. And then I feel like a lot of college graduates, you graduate with a degree like thinking that your life is on this trajectory path, and then suddenly when things don't work out you kind of have like a crisis moment. And I was like very like caught off guard by just, okay, well, now what do I do? Like I've spent all this time kind of pursuing this thing and I don't know what to do. And so I moved home. I was in LA at the time, and then moved back home to Orange County just like without a clue. And just kind of my dad actually told me like, just find the first job that sounds interesting to you. Like, don't worry about it, you'll figure it out, but just like pursue things that are interesting to you.
Right.
And I went online and found a posting for a job at a flower shop, and was like, that sounds so fun. Like, let's just give that a go. And I knew that I was somebody who was like creative. I was always growing up, like always crafting, always like trying to paint and figure things out like that. So the idea of working in like a creative atmosphere like that and working with my hands was appealing. So I was like, let's just give it a go and see how I feel about it. And started working there and really loved it. Didn't know a thing about flowers. And so slowly like started to learn flower names and flower care and things like that. And I was hired to just kind of help like run the shop and keep things clean. But I was so eager to design that I like wouldn't stop bothering them about letting me help. And I started working there around like Valentine's Day and then Mother's Day. And so like if you've ever worked in a flower shop around that time, you know that like everything, it goes crazy and they're just willing for help. And so I just jumped in and started making stuff. And that was kind of like where I fell in love with it. And then the shop that I worked at was close to a lot of wedding venues, like smaller wedding venues. And so they would do some small weddings here and there. And that was like, I love this. Like, I want to do weddings and figure this out. So I worked there for a bit and learned some. And then ultimately I left and just decided, like, I want to start my own thing and I want to figure it out. And that is kind of like the rest is history. I started just doing weddings for friends and anyone I knew that was engaged or getting married. Like, I was like, let me do your flowers, please. Like, I just need to figure this out and want to get experience from it. And slowly kind of built my thing from there. So it was, a real scrappy journey. And I look back and it's funny because I'm like, I had no idea what I was doing. And it's so funny that I pulled off the things that I was able to pull off. But I feel like that's kind of the heart of an entrepreneur. Like, you just have a dream and you pursue it and go for it and make it happen. So it's been a good 8 years. I'm proud of where I started and proud of where I'm at now, and just excited to see what continues to come in the future.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I love that story. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
So, your Design Star series on activation really took us through the process from start to finish. Can you tell us how you got started designing for brands and how you approach these collaborations now versus when you first started in your journey?
Yeah, I think I started just my network of people. Again, of where I'm located, I'm really central to a lot of bigger brand like headquarters and corporations. A lot of stuff is based out of LA. So proximity to that is really helpful. And you kind of just have a friend of a friend who's looking for a florist. And so your name gets tossed in there. And that's kind of how it snowballs from there. I think my very first brand job was actually with Arbonne International. They're like a beauty and skincare company. And again, like, I had a friend who runs their media production stuff. And so they needed someone, I think at the time it was like cherry blossoms. They needed cherry blossoms for like a brand shoot. He was like, I don't know, but I know somebody that knows flowers. So, like, let me just see if I can make this happen. And so I got brought on to help like consult their cherry blossom shoot for the day. And so I was just on site with them while they were shooting video content, and like product shots. And so they just needed like blooms for stuff. And I think even at the time, like, cherry blossoms had just gone out of season. So I had to find something that was like a good substitute.
I
So
know,
it's
I
just,
wanted to know. I was like, were you able to get cherry blossoms?
I
Because
know,
that's
because
very
it's so
specific
specific.
and they're
Yeah,
not
totally.
always
Yeah, it
available.
was it was like, oh, you guys just missed the window by like 2 weeks. So I think I used like some lilac and like some other stuff that was like really flower, like that kind of a thing. But
Right.
yeah, so it's kind of just that thing. Like, it's so, again, I feel like it's so random and so off the cusp that you really just have to be willing to like grasp the opportunity when it comes your way. I think you have to be a little scrappy too. A lot of brand stuff comes at the last minute where I'm like, I have a week to pull this whole thing together. And so you kind of just have to hit the ground running and be willing to like work really hard to make it happen. I think it's very rare that you get a brand inquiry where you have like months to put together a perfect production schedule and everything like that. So I would say, yeah, from when I first started until now, I think it's just a working understanding of that timeline and really how to like expedite the final product. And then I think just gaining confidence too in speaking with brands and knowing how to, knowing where to push back on certain things that they're asking for, and knowing my worth in that way too, because it is really stressful when you don't have a long timeline to work with. Like, you are running around like crazy trying to make stuff happen. And so just knowing that it is fair to ask for fair compensation in that way, I think is something that I've gained a lot of understanding along the way too. And I think just knowing how to manage those conversations, and just be, professional and stand my ground and making sure that I'm not feeling taken advantage of. I think that that's a really important thing to learn, in this industry. And so I would say that is probably the
Right.
biggest lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is like one of my questions, because in your first video, you talk about pricing, and more
Hmm.
specifically knowing your worth and charging to reflect that. Did it take you a while to get to that point where you felt comfortable charging what you really needed to make money and not just break even, both
Yeah.
for brand activations and for weddings?
Yeah. I would say, I think across the board, that's just the journey of a creative entrepreneur, because your work is your passion, and so it's something that you really enjoy doing and you have a lot of fun doing it. And I think a lot of times too, we are in the position where we're like, well, I would never pay this much money for something like this, so let me like
Right.
price myself emotionally, because I feel like if I actually were to charge this amount, like, there's no way anybody would ever say yes to that. And so you get nervous of like, well, I'll never book a job if I price myself here. And so I think it's a journey of learning how to separate the emotion from pricing. And it's just like pure facts. Like you can actually look at the numbers of like, this is how much it costs me to produce this. This is how much time, and my time is money. And so then getting to that final price point, like you have to really just take the emotion out of it and look at the numbers and know those things. So yeah, it did take me a while. Like I'll be totally honest there. When I first started, like I said, doing weddings for friends, I just really wanted the experience and wanted to get my hands dirty and do something. So most of the things I did, it was purely for cost. Like I think even if that, I think if I were to go back and start over again, I would say that it's that I wouldn't charge what I'm charging now just because I did have a strong lack of experience and I didn't totally know what I was doing, but I think I would pay attention to like I would start paying attention to my numbers a lot sooner. It wasn't until I really went in on a studio space that I got really serious about how much money I was making and how much I was charging because I also then had to pay overhead on my business, like got exponentially more expensive. And I think that that was a great learning lesson for me. And then I have kids now too. So I have a 1 year old and a 4 year old. And so, like, my time is suddenly so much more valuable because any time I'm spending in my business is away from my kids. And that means
Right.
I'm, hiring a babysitter or putting them in daycare and figuring that crazy world out of leaving
Mhm.
your kids and dropping them off. It is like an emotional roller coaster anytime I have to leave the house from them in the morning. So if I'm going through all of that, it better be worth it. And then to factor that in too, now that I have kids, my family really depends on my income. So I'm not playing around anymore. It's not just like a hobby type of thing for me. I'm really considering all of these other factors. And that makes it important for me to know that I am able to bring home money at the end of the day, to contribute to my family's well-being. And so I am pretty unashamed in that. I think a lot of florists really tiptoe around that, but I place a high emphasis and value on that. So yeah, I would say it's a journey of like going through all of that from starting with very little responsibility and just slowly as things have accumulated over time. I've learned to really go back and look at my numbers and pay attention to how much time I'm spending on things. A couple of things that I've like really factored into my process along the way is keeping track of my time, like actually documenting how many hours I'm spending on a wedding or how many hours I'm spending on a brand project. And you can do that a couple times. And by the end of it, you'll have a pretty rough framework of like, okay, if the floral amount is this much money, I know that I'm probably going to spend this much time. And so then when you go to put together like your next proposal for something, it's like not only accounting for your costs, but accounting for your time. And so just having a rough framework of like, okay, this many hours is going to go into it, and I'm probably going to need this many freelancers. So let me make sure that my pricing is, fluctuated to account for that. Those are
Right.
all things that I've really learned to do over the years that have made it, again, just made it worth my time, making sure that I'm running a business and not just kind of having a hobby.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
So obviously we've been talking more about brands, but we know that you do wedding work as well. So what would you
Sure.
say is the biggest difference between working with brands versus brides?
Yeah, I think I kinda touched on it, but definitely the timeline. I mean, when you're booking a wedding, sometimes you're booking them 3, 6, a year out in advance, and so you're really it's a slow build up to that production week where you
Mm-hmm.
are managing changes, you're bringing on a team, like, you have so much time to prepare, and I'm such a I'm a whatever I can do ahead of time, I will do. So, like, for me, a wedding is, like, great because I can spend a week cleaning my vessels, prepping my vessels, having everything laid out in the studio. I know exactly, like, I've packed up my hard goods, they're ready to go, like a week in advance, all of that kind of stuff. When you're working with a brand, it is like literally you might have, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks to kind of just hit the ground running. And a lot of times, like, it's big production stuff where you have like a ton of centerpieces, a ton of installations, and you're like ordering flowers and running around. And it's just like, okay, this is so much faster than doing a wedding. So I would say that is a huge difference. And then it's real touch and go with depending on the brand that you're working with. Some of them really are so hands off that it's like you could do whatever and they really don't care. They just want something fun.
Right.
And they're like, okay. Some of them are a little bit more particular. So I will say there's some like some brides are really particular. Some brands are really particular about what they want and what what you're bringing to the table too. So it kind of differs a little bit there, but I would say overall, brand work tends to be much like funkier, more fun. You can be a lot more creative with it than you can with a wedding. Wedding stuff is usually pretty traditional for the most part. Every now and again, it does get a little funky here and there, but I think across the board, brand stuff is brighter, more fun, more, yeah, just like more installation heavy, even too. Like you're really thinking outside of the box to make an impact with flowers.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Do you find that your brides are still very big on like what is trending in the wedding world, and that's kind of what influences what they want to do?
I think so, yeah, and I think that, stuff gets trendy for a reason, and so I think,
Mhm.
like, people tend to gravitate towards what they see on Instagram and on Pinterest, and so whatever's popular at the moment is definitely where they draw their inspiration from, so I think,
Right.
I don't think we'll ever get away from that.
Yeah. In your part of the world, what is trending with weddings and events?
What is trending?
Mhm.
That's a great question. I mean, I think like a white wedding is always going to be kind of a gravitational pull. I think brides really gravitate towards that just because the idea of like, a timeless, more romantic type of feel. White is always that. I think right now there's still a lot of really like organic stuff. Like I'm using a lot of grasses in weddings. Just a lot of like meadowy type feel installations, things like that are still really popular. A lot of hydrangea. Like I've had a lot of hydrangea weddings, which has been kind of fun, like really fun, like moundy hydrangea type of stuff where it's just like big clusters of hydrangea a lot. Been doing a lot of things like that.
Awesome. Good, good, good.
Mhm.
Okay, going back to brands, what would your dream brand be to work with it you haven't
Yeah,
worked with yet?
that's a good question. I mean, I feel like for me right now in my life, I really value and just I'm drawn towards anybody that's willing to really like push me creatively. So I just want to work with brands that are doing really fun, off the cusp kind of things like that is what I'm drawn to. Personally, Free People is a brand that I've always like, I'll just put that out there in the universe that I've always really loved. So it would be so fun to do something with them at some point in time. But yeah.
So we're gonna tag free people later.
Yeah.
Free
Got a
people.
got a florist for you.
I love it. You got to put it out there in the world.
It's so true, you do.
I just typed in a note and it did something wonky. Okay. Okay, so we talked about pricing. I'm going to move on to the next question I have is when I love this question. When you're asked to do something free for exposure and you
Mhm.
politely decline, are most brands receptive and willing to pay your fee, or do you find that they typically move on? And how
Yeah.
often does that happen to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, yeah, I mean, to be totally honest, I think when somebody is looking for something for free to then be countered and say, like, no, you actually need to compensate me, they're usually going to move on. So I think, like, if that is the response that are going to have, just be prepared that the opportunity will probably pass. But I think the practice of that is really important because I think again, it's just knowing where to set your boundary and, like, where to stand your ground in that way, and so I think just having that set in your mind and it's like, I this is just not the right opportunity for me. I also think, like, just as an industry, like, as florists, I think it's just to have a united front in that way is
Right.
important and helpful because it just sets the expectation that, like, this is not an industry that you can kind of take advantage of in that way. And I think the sad part about things like that is just that it's typically people with money or people who can't afford it are just kind of like free balling and like looking for something for free.
Right.
I found like a lot of times it's again like the people or the brands with money, like, and they can't afford it, they feel like they can take advantage of other people. Whereas
Mhm.
people who, might not have like infinite amount of money, but they do value the service, they are willing to pay for it or meet somewhere in the middle of like, okay, I can't afford all of that, but I can afford this, and I'd still love to compensate you. Like they're much more gracious, and
Right.
much more, at the end of the day too, like the times that you maybe do say yes to like free exposure, it's always those jobs that you regret it because at the end of the day, like they're taking advantage of you. They're going to add so much more stress to your life. They're going to add this, and this, and like it's never enough. And they just want more and more and more. And so, yeah, I think like just knowing going into it that if you do decline something in that way, like they probably will move on. And just to know that like at the end of the day, it's not worth your time. Like it's probably for the better that you aren't working with them. I think those lessons are things that we oftentimes have to learn the hard way. So if anybody is gonna hear anything from this, it's that. Like just know that typically those are not the jobs that you want to take.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you think there are cases though that you would take on and do it for exposure that you think would be beneficial or
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, if you are on if, like, your dream brand comes along and they wanna work with you or something like that, and you just, like, feel like you can't say no, like, it's your prerogative and it's your business to do exactly what you wanna do with it. I would say though, like whatever it is that you are hoping to get out of it, I would have that conversation with them. So if it's, like exposure, what does exposure mean? Are you just tagging me on Instagram? Are you going to like create a little sizzle reel from it? And are you going to like highlight my brand name? Am I going to be in any of the like, marketing materials that are going to be at the event? Like, is my name plastered anywhere on a board? Like, what is exposure? And just making sure that you really are upfront with having those conversations. I know a lot of time people do things for portfolio images when they first start out, but I would
right?
really even dig into that deeper of like, who is the photographer? What does their work look like? Are they actually shooting floral specific images, or are they just grand scheme images of the whole thing and like my flowers might be a blimp in the background? Like you really need to make sure that whatever you are hoping to get out of it, you do have a conversation with them ahead of time. And if you can, like draw up a contract that really explicitly outlines that, just so again that you don't get taken advantage of.
Right.
Because people like, like your work is not their priority at the end of the day. Like they're looking at the event as a whole, and your florals are just like a small portion of that. And they want your flowers because they want this whole picture in their head. And so I think like we always think that our flowers are going to be the most important thing because they're the most important thing to us. And so it's just really making sure that you again have those conversations so that what you are hoping to get out of it is what you actually get out of it and you're not left disappointed at the end.
Awesome. I do have a question for you. And again, if you guys are watching or listening, let me know if you have any questions for Arice.
Mhm.
And this is more about education. So they're wanting to know if you offer any courses or education or workshop type of things.
Yeah, I do. I've quietly offered just like mentorships and kind of design workshops on my website. It's never something that I've like publicly announced just because again with my kids it's been hard for me to kind of like figure out how I want to launch that and what I want to do with it, but I oftentimes do like one-to-one mentorship calls just for like an hour or two like over a series of months, with some florists who are just trying to figure out how to get their businesses started or kind of even figuring out like financial stuff of like how to pay yourself and like what does it look like to take a profit, and then from that how do you if I want to go in on a studio or something like that, just looking at those kind of things. So
Right.
yeah, I definitely do. It's something that I like really want to get more into. If you can't tell, I'm like super passionate about just kind of the like behind the scenes business side. I feel like that's a it's an area of education, I think, in our industry that is lacking. I think a lot of florists spend a lot of time focusing on like design mentorships, which are obviously very important. But I think like we're very quiet on like, well, how much money are you actually making? And I think those conversations need to be had because I think it's something that like levels up our business. Like if we're all kind of on the same page, then we're all charging the same, and then it just makes it easier for us to make profits and things like that. So I really, like I said, I really hope to kind of put together more of a formal course in like maybe the coming year where I can really walk florists through that and we can kind of have those honest conversations and really look at what we need to do to just do better for ourselves and for our families.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Real quick, I didn't have this on the list of questions, but it just, I was looking at your Instagram while you were talking about,
Hmm.
all of that. And obviously, I feel like just looking at it on surface level, it seems like it's a great page, and you have over 10,000 followers. And I always feel like a lot of people have questions about social media and kind of using that to grow their business. So has
Sure.
that been a good, avenue for you, a path for you to grow your business with social media?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt, and I know Instagram, we all struggle with, like, the weird comparison things of it, and, like, I go through that too. I feel like this year especially has been a weird season for me. I think this has been a slower year for me, and so anytime you get on Instagram, it's like, "Ugh, I didn't book that job, but this person did," things like that that are
Right,
so
right,
silly. And so I think, I'll be the first to be totally honest and say, like, it can be really hard. And there's been times, so many times where I'm like, do I even need to be on Instagram? Can I just remove myself from it? And I don't have a great answer for that, honestly. I've honestly never stepped completely away from Instagram and have run my business. But I think everything we do is word of mouth. Like that is number one of how I get most of my jobs is just word of mouth stuff and referrals. And so I think if you're able to build relationships, like if you do weddings with wedding planners or even brand stuff, a lot of brand stuff that I've gotten has come from planners who kind of do both worlds of weddings and brand stuff. So, I mean, I almost treat them more like my clients than like my actual brides and stuff like that, just because I know that they're going to be the ones who then refer me in the future. So, once you get a good footing and you have those relationships, I think it's more important to maintain those than to like keep posting stuff on social media. I think it's nice to have an Instagram because it's like an instant place that people can go to see your portfolio.
right.
But I think, don't dog yourself down if you don't have 10,000 followers. I mean, I've been doing this for 8 years and I think I just hit 10K this year. So it's, like, I think we live in a world where people can get that one reel that has like a million views and they suddenly have like 20,000 followers and you like are so, you're like, why didn't that happen to me? But I think the world of Instagram is super flashy. I think
Mhm.
it's a real quick kind of like reward thing. And so I would just say to people like if you're not there within those connections, it's not the end of the world. Like your business can still flourish and still grow outside of having a ton of followers. I think it's just really making personal connections in this industry goes so much further. And like, sure, there have been planners that have seen my Instagram page and then they reach out to me. But, if there are people that you want to work with, you can also reach out to them and just put your work in front of them. And it might not be like an instant yes, but at least like opening the door for a future relationship goes so much further than, again, having 20 or 30,000 followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Yeah, and I feel like you answered the question that came in through one of our
Yeah.
YouTube viewers. They asked, "What alternative can we use opposed to social media? I don't use it at all." And so you did talk about referrals and kind of making those
Yeah.
connections. Is there any other
Yeah.
kind of
And
ideas you have there?
I think just knowing like what it is that you want. So, are you a florist that wants to do, like local weddings at local venues? Well, great. Why don't you reach out to those venues and kind of try to build relationships there and hopefully get on like their preferred vendor list? Or what wedding planners really work in your area? And again, reaching out to them directly. Like, as a florist, truthfully, like we're kind of a third party vendor. So, we're the vendor that couples are going to book typically after they book their planner, their venue, their photographer. So if you can build relationships like, and this is again speaking in the world of weddings, but it kind of translates into brands too. But if you can build relationships with those three areas, like your name will get tossed around and people will reach out to you just based on that. So it's not even really like you have to be, like your profile doesn't have to be up here because typically people aren't even, couples aren't even really looking for their florist on Instagram. I think like they'll probably look for their venue or their planner on Instagram, but they'll kind of get to us after that. If you're like a flower shop or something in the area, I think you can do so many like more local pop-ups. I think like mailers are even a really great idea if you're a flower shop. And then I think flower shop too, just getting on, I guess this kind of does fall under social media, but like Yelp, Google business, like that's the number one place that people go and like managing your search engine optimization, because that's where
Yes.
people typically look for those types of things. I think sometimes, again, I've said this before, but I think sometimes we get in this mindset that like Instagram is the end all be all because we spend so much of our time there and we're comparing ourselves to other people. But I think there's a huge value in looking outside that little
Yeah.
phone box of ours.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love looking at, the OGs of marketing, right? I
Mhm.
think it's very important for businesses to kind of pay attention to. But I do feel like if you have zero social media presence, I think it is worth it to like work on building it, even if you have a small following, just so
Sure.
people do follow rabbit holes, or like if you do work with someone and they want to be able to tag you, just that in itself is like really powerful too.
Yeah,
It kind
yeah,
of,
I think treating it like a portfolio as just
yes,
a place of like, "I did this, let me just post about it so that in the future somebody can come and see my work here." I think that's a great kind of way to view it. I think, like, focusing more on that side versus, getting caught in the weeds of like, "I have to be the next big, like,
right,
Instagram," like, that kind of a
right.
thing. I don't think that that's important, but like you're saying, I do think having kinda just treating it as an online portfolio is
Yeah,
a great way
yeah.
to do it.
And
Mhm.
then just talking about the SEO too, I just wanted to add to that because your website is such a, I think, key component when you are kind of having a business and getting found by other people. Everything's so digital.
Mhm.
So if there is no social media, definitely, and even if you do have social media, having a website is such an important thing that I think some people overlook. I've seen people have just Instagram and that is it, and the
Mhm.
fact of the matter is that you don't own Instagram. And I know people who've lost their accounts before.
Yeah.
As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, my daughter has like a sports account that we posted stuff to for like years and years and years. And she didn't get hacked, but we aren't able to get into her account
Oh,
anymore. And I
no.
like found a
Yeah.
post that like, for her, it's not a big deal. Like, I have the stuff somewhere else. But if I was a business, I was thinking, how upset would I be? If I like, they're asking for codes, but we don't have codes. Like, we didn't set up the two-factor authentication. So they're like saying,
Sure.
we're sending it to this app. But we don't have the app. So it's
Yeah.
like, Instagram is very buggy, and things like that happen all the time, and their support is terrible. So if that's your only thing, on the flip side of that, you really need to have your own website where you own it, you own the content, you can control that, and
Mhm.
people can find you, and the SEO is huge. So just
Yeah.
again, with
Yeah.
the referral part of it is really great there, and
Yeah.
just organic
Absolutely.
search traffic.
Mhm.
So
That's
love to
such a
answer
bummer that that
questions.
happened to your daughter.
I know. She's like,
That's
you
so
can't get in
devastating.
there. And don't you know
Yeah.
everything about this stuff? I was like, yes, I've spent hours trying to get into your account. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no. No.
But again, it's not the end of the world. But like, again, for a business, and if that's their only thing, or
Yeah, it
even
could
for just
be.
to start all over, it's just
Yeah,
horrible. You
yeah.
know what I
No,
mean?
and I've heard so many people talk about the importance of building like an email list because then you
Yes.
actually own all the emails and you can directly get in contact with people that are interested in working with your brand or following your story versus like Instagram. If it were to go away, you lose contact with all of those people. And I think
Yes.
that is super true. And so just having a back end way to directly communicate to people who are interested in you versus having to do it through a third party app. Like,
Yes,
yeah. Mhm.
exactly, exactly. Email list is huge, and we do a lot of that. Email marketing is probably our number one thing that we do as a company. So,
Mhm.
and we have all different ways, right? Like, and I have different lists. I have lists of like customers or people who qualified to be a customer. I have lists
Sure.
of just regular leads, and then we have different conversations with them just depending on where they fall in the funnel.
Mhm.
But that's going to go into like a whole nother hour of things. But
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
that is really great to kind of just be aware of. And if it isn't something that you guys have set up, I highly recommend to build your business
Mhm.
that way. And
Mhm.
we can do a show on that in the future,
Mhm.
talking about funnels and email marketing and automation and all that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
it's helpful. It's a great tool. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I have another comment here. It says, I found restaurants are amazing customers if they like your work. Weekly sales have been great. What other businesses can I reach out to? Any thoughts there.
Yeah. It sounds, maybe I'm gonna assume, do you run a flower shop or do you do events? Because I would assume if you're doing restaurant stuff, that sounds more flower shop to me. But I would just say like any local, I mean, anybody that's local to your area, where people, when I worked at the flower shop that I worked at, we had like standing orders with like dentists, doctors' offices, like different things like that, that people just wanted fresh flowers. In there, like in the lobby of the waiting rooms or things like that. And so those are really great ways, one, for people to see your work, but also to just have recurring income in that way. Like if you can set up a relationship with those types of businesses where every week or every 2 weeks you come in and replace the arrangement, like I feel like as a flower shop, like it's kind of like having a subscription. You have like recurring income in that way. And that is like such a sweet spot. So I would say focusing on those things, going, maybe reaching out to hotels is also really great. A lot of hotels too, people get married or use those spaces for their events. And so just being able to be a referral point for them when people are asking, like, where do I go if I need a florist? If your arrangements are in the lobby, obviously they'll refer you in that way too. So just don't be afraid to reach out and get your work in front of places like that.
Perfect. Perfect, perfect,
Mhm.
perfect. I had a question come through on Instagram because we were talking about websites,
Sure.
and it's obsessed with flowers. I like that. They want to know, is there a website company that you recommend? And I think they mean like build a website.
Oh, sure.
Do you
Mhm.
have a platform that you're familiar with that you work with?
Yeah, mine is built on Squarespace, which has been great. And I mean, when I first started, I put it up myself. So Squarespace is really great about they have a lot of templates that you can kind of choose from and pick the
Yeah.
one that feels true to you and your style. And then you kind of just go in and edit, the wording and things like that. Obviously, you can get deeper into like coding and customizing. And so now my website, I reached out to somebody, a graphic designer, to help me like further flesh out the branding of my business and implement that into my website. So a lot of it right now, she went in and figured out how to do all of that for me. But the foundation of it is still the very, very first one that I put together from Squarespace like years and years and years ago. So yes, that's the only one that I'm really familiar with.
Yeah.
So I would say check that one out for sure. And their pricing is really affordable to like house your domain on it. And they give you, you get like an actual like Google, what am I trying to say? Like Google Office email address too, which I think is really helpful. Like it won't be, at Gmail, it'll be whatever your name is
Sure.
at your business name. And so
Yes.
that I think gives people peace of mind for whatever reason. I think people have an expectation of what like a professional business looks like. And when you have like a real email address like that, it kind of just, you know, it makes you look legit.
I
So
agree.
I
I think,
always really
yeah,
encourage people to have that. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying too about having an actual website. I think people just kind of expect that. Like it feels fishy if it's like, oh, you don't have a real website. Like,
right,
how am I paying you? Like, they'll just
right.
feels kind of funny. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. I agree. I've used Squarespace before, obviously not for Mayesh because we have a really crazy, complicated website.
Yeah, your guys'
So,
thing is insane.
very complicated, so we can't
Mhm,
use anything like that. But yes, Squarespace I think is really great, and I do like their templates, and they're more modern and just
mhm.
they make beautiful websites for
Yes.
people who aren't, coding or developers or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah.
that. They make
Mhm,
it fairly easy, and they do make it easy to set up like a website or an email address with your domain name, and I
mhm.
think that's crazy important. I do see a lot of people that just use Yahoo or Gmail and things like that. And it does make it seem like you are like just starting out, or and you might be, but sometimes you don't really want that to
Want
be
to know
your
that? Yeah,
initial
yeah.
like portrayal, right? Like your
Mhm.
initial what do you call it
Your
when you're
impression. Yeah, your
yes,
first
impression,
impression.
that
Mhm.
word. I couldn't think of impression at all.
Yeah.
So it just helps you kind of elevate the kind of who you are immediately. And it's like
Yeah, definitely.
it
It's a
does that.
simple thing you could do that automatically levels up your business. So,
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah, for sure. I had someone ask about like a wholesale florist. So I shared our website. You can check us out. We do sell to floral professionals and floral businesses throughout the country. And I do believe we ship to Philadelphia. So thank you for asking, Eric. And let me see. There is someone asking, someone on YouTube again, the Megala, wants to know about, do we see punk ikebana taking over and what other styles are becoming popular? I want to keep up with new
Mm.
styles, shop and boutique and events. I've never heard of punk ikebana. Have you, Arice?
I'm not, yeah, I don't know specifically the punk, but Ikebana style stuff I think has been popular for a minute.
Mhm.
I have done so many little Ikebana things for different events over the years. I think that like minimalist style, it's kind of like a bud vase. I think in the simplicity, like people think it's dainty and cute, but it's like a little bit more of an elevated bud vase type of thing where it's just like the few stems coming out of a flower frog.
Right.
So yeah, definitely I would say that look has been popular for a minute and I think it's continuing to be popular. I always encourage people to go back to pricing and stuff like that. The thing about Ikebana is that's so hard is a lot of that stuff has to be set up on site because it is so dainty. It just kind
Mhm.
of falls apart if you do it ahead of time. So make sure that you are, if somebody asks for that, make sure that you're kind of considering that in your production thing. Like you can't make those and put them in a case because they'll fall apart by the time you get to the venue. So you kind of have to have extra labor on site to make sure that those are being fluffed up and they look good. So that's why I always tell people, even though it's a couple stems, it's not the same price as a bud vase because I actually have to like account that into my day of production versus a bud vase. I can make ahead of time. It's not going to fall apart. And then I can take it out of the container and put it on a table. It's a little bit different. So again, those are just all things you have to consider when you're pricing your services.
Very good. So, Arise, what advice would you give to someone just starting out, who's still building their portfolio and their confidence?
Mhm.
This question I've written down is more about like kind of pricing. I feel like we've talked about that. So, what other kind of advice do you have for someone that's
Yeah,
just starting
I would
out?
say just meet as many florists in your area as you can. This job is weird, especially when you run your own business. You're kind of in your own little silo world. And so just having a community of people that you can talk shop with and just kind of get a pulse on what everybody else is doing is so helpful. And freelancing is like probably the best and fastest way to learn. To just jump in and help other florists and kind of see the way that they run their businesses and their production and then learning on-site mechanics and things like that. Freelancing is huge. I think like if I were to go back and start over, I would probably just try to focus on spending a few years freelancing. It's so funny when I left the flower shop that I worked at, like because I knew that I wanted to get into the world of weddings, I just kind of jumped into that. I didn't even really realize that you could freelance for other florists. Like I thought you kind of just had to do it yourself. So I I wish that I could go back and just learn to jump in and kind of build a community of people that way. So I would say that. I also think just really focusing like as many times as you can. I would say once a week, try to just get your hands on flowers and create and design and really learn what your style is and learn what you love to do. I think when you're first starting out, the temptation is to say yes to any opportunity that comes your way. And then I think once you do that for a couple of years down the road, you kind of start to look around and you're like, I don't really know. Like, I might not want to do this style of wedding anymore, but because you've said yes to it so often, like, those are the types of inquiries that you're going to get. And so just keeping in mind that, like, the work that you put out is what you're going to attract. And so knowing what it is that you want and knowing what your style is that you feel comfortable with, like that will set you up, I think, to go further faster versus saying yes to everything. You get kind of lost in this jumble where it's like, well, what kind of style, what kind of florist are you? Like, what do you do? Do you do the timeless romantic weddings? Do you do like, the more modern, trendy stuff? Like, where do you fall in that? I would say go back and do that too, because that was a mistake that I made. I just kind of said yes to everything and then got lost in it and then tried to have to like detangle my stuff from the things that I no longer wanted to do. And it takes a lot longer to do that and to just focus on your own style from the very beginning. So yeah, those are the areas I would say focus on.
Very good.
And
How would you describe your style right now?
yeah. I lean really into contemporary trends. So whatever's popular right now is like where I kind of gravitate towards, but I'm really, I would say it's contemporary, but with a focus on more like organic textural things. I'm very into like movement and intentional stem placement. I don't really like things that have just a ton of stuff together. I really like to focus on, I want to take the viewer's eye like on a journey through my arrangements. And so I find for me, the easiest way to do that is through like more minimalist, intentional stem placement stuff. So I typically only use like 3 to 7 types of flowers in an arrangement. I really like focusing more, yeah, on smaller moments and things like that.
Very good. This
Mhm.
was so amazing, Arice. Thank you so, so much.
Yeah, thank you for your time. It's so fun.
It was. It was fun, and we got so many great questions. So thank you guys for watching live with us, and thank you in advance to anyone that is listening or watching the replay. I so, so appreciate your time. If you guys, again, haven't checked out Arice's design videos, make sure you go to mayesh.com and visit our blog. They're all there. You can also find us on YouTube, on Instagram, and Facebook. We're everywhere you are. We try to be, at
Mhm.
least.
Mhm.
And again, thank you so much for joining us. That's a wrap on today's Mornings with Mayesh. Stay tuned for our next show, and we will see you soon. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Yay, bye.